Jeffrey Dahmer, a name that resonates with infamy in American history, is remembered as one of the most heinous serial killers ever known. His gruesome acts, carried out in the heart of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, sent shockwaves across the globe, leaving a trail of horror and disbelief. Today, we embark on a harrowing journey into the depths of Dahmer's psyche, retracing his steps from an ordinary childhood shadowed by disquieting behaviors to his transformation into a figure of monstrous cruelty. This exploration takes us beyond the sensational headlines, delving into the intricate layers of Dahmer's life, his disturbing acts, and the profound impact they left on society. Jeffrey Dahmer's story unfolds in the seemingly unremarkable city of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Born into what appeared to be a typical suburban family, his early years masked a myriad of underlying disturbances that would later erupt into a series of heinous acts. At first glance, his life seemed ordinary, but a closer look reveals a series of disquieting signs that foreshadowed his future path. From a tender age, Dahmer demonstrated deeply unsettling behaviors that were far from the realms of typical childhood curiosity. His unusual interest in dead animals was not merely a macabre pastime. It was a morbid fascination that hinted at the profound darkness developing within him. This obsession with the macabre, combined with his overwhelming sense of isolation, increasingly alienated him from his peers and family. As Dahmer transitioned into his teenage years, his inner turmoil began to churn with greater ferocity. He grappled with an intensifying detachment from reality, his introspective nature masking a tempest of psychological chaos. This period was marked by increasing alcohol abuse, a vice that Dahmer resorted to in an attempt to quell his inner demons. Yet this only served to plunge him deeper into a state of isolation and despair. This troubling trajectory was punctuated by clear warning signs: his fixation with dead creatures, his growing reclusiveness, and the silent, unaddressed cries for help that emanated from his troubled psyche.
There were red flags, there were warning signs that you missed?
There definitely were warning signs that I missed, but I didn't believe it, or it's hard to believe. It really is. I'll give you one example. When he was about somewhere in the 11, 12 to 14 age range, he roamed around the country roads where we lived and gathered on his bike with big plastic bags the remains of various animals, foxes, small dogs, animals that had been killed on the road, and took them back home. And ours was extremely heavily wooded lot, a very rough terrain, where he did, as I found out later, at the time of his so-called insanity trial, found out for the first time there that he did this. And he kept these animals and felt them, explored them, their insides, their entrails, and terrible things like that. Although I've had friends who have told me they've done the same sort of thing, but that would have been a red flag.
However, these red flags were largely overlooked or misunderstood. The absence of meaningful psychiatric intervention, or a deeper understanding of his distress, allowed the dark impulses lurking within Dahmer to fester and intensify, unchecked and unchallenged. Dahmer's evolution from a seemingly ordinary child to a figure of profound notoriety was shaped significantly by the environment of neglect and misunderstanding that surrounded him. The seeds of his future atrocities were insidiously planted and nurtured in these formative, yet markedly significant years. This progression from a troubled child into one of the most infamous killers in American history stands as a stark, unsettling reminder of the complexity of the human psyche. It highlights the catastrophic consequences of societal neglect and the failure to recognize and address burgeoning psychological disturbances. His journey is punctuated by a series of missed opportunities for intervention, from his school years, where his odd behavior and alcoholism were noted but not adequately addressed, to the lack of familial support and understanding in his adolescence. Each of these factors contributed to Dahmer's descent into darkness. underscoring the tragic reality that his path might have been altered had these early signs been appropriately heeded.
Marty Schmidt was a high school friend of Dahmer's.
It just seemed to me that he was so lost that I felt real strongly, always like something very tragic was going to happen.
She said back then he had a major problem with alcohol.
And yet I remember that kid that, somebody should have helped and didn't.
As Jeffrey Dahmer crossed the threshold of his 18th year, a sinister and profound metamorphosis occurred. This was no mere transition from adolescence to adulthood. It marked his evolution from a troubled, isolated youth to an embodiment of pure, unadulterated evil. His descent was not a gradual decline, but a rapid, harrowing plunge into an abyss of unspeakable brutality and inhumanity, an alarming deviation from the norms of society and morality. Dahmer's heinous acts, each more vile and appalling than the last, were the result of a complex and deeply disturbing amalgamation of urges. At the core of his motivations were necrophilic and cannibalistic desires, forming a horrific mosaic of perverse and unthinkable acts. These desires were not mere aberrations. They were central to his very being, driving him to commit atrocities that challenged the limits of human depravity.
Not because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons, and eventually I did turn to cannibalism.
His profound inability to establish normal human connections cast him into an ocean of isolation. This isolation was not just a byproduct of his psyche, but a fertile breeding ground for his deep-seated psychological issues. In this desolate psychological landscape, Dahmer's twisted impulses took root and flourished. Each act of violence, each ghastly crime he committed, served to feed and amplify these desires, pushing him ever deeper into a vortex of moral corruption and depravity. The human cost of Dahmer's actions was immeasurable. His victims, primarily young men, were not mere numbers or faceless entities. They were individuals, each with their own unique stories, hopes, and dreams. These young lives were brutally cut short, ensnared by Dahmer's diabolical schemes. Their tragic fates were compounded by the unthinkable post-mortem indignities they suffered, which served to highlight the sheer extent of Dahmer's psychological perversion and detachment from the values of human life. In Dahmer's world, the value of human life was grossly distorted, treated with a callousness and cruelty that defied understanding. His actions were a testament to the darkest capabilities of the human psyche, showcasing a level of depravity that was both horrifying and deeply unsettling. Dahmer's descent into darkness serves as a grim reminder of the potential for evil that can reside within, particularly when fueled by unchecked psychological disturbances and societal alienation. Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror, which cast a shadow over Milwaukee, represents one of the most disturbing episodes in the annals of criminal history. Dubbed the Milwaukee Monster, Dahmer's actions were a nightmarish blend of cunning and brutality. He preyed upon young men, many from marginalized groups, luring them to his apartment with deceit and false promises. Once there, they found themselves trapped in a scenario far beyond the most horrifying nightmares. Each encounter orchestrated by Dahmer culminated in unspeakable tragedy. Not content with merely taking the lives of his victims, he descended into further depths of depravity, engaging in acts of necrophilia and the gruesome dismemberment of their bodies. His apartment, the epicenter of these atrocities, transformed into a ghastly tableau of terror, replete with chilling evidence of his misdeeds. Photographs of his victims, skeletal remains, and other macabre trophies were testament to the extent and horror of his crimes.
Why did you photograph them?
It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep something. If I couldn't keep them there with me whole, at least I felt that I could keep their skeletons.
He became so warped by his evil impulses that he even took a victim's head with him to work at the Ambrosia chocolate factory.
I kept the mummified head and skull of one of the victims in a carrying case in my locker at work.
Were you almost flaunting it?
Yes, but that's how strong the compulsion was. I was branching out. That's when the cannibalism started, eating of the heart and the arm muscle. It was a way of making me feel that they were a part of me.
Could someone like you be stopped? Could you be helped?
No, I was dead set on going with this compulsion. It was the only thing that gave me any satisfaction.
The fact that Dahmer was able to perpetrate these acts over several years is a stark indictment of the societal and law enforcement systems of the time. It underscores not only a failure in policing and public safety measures, but also a deeper, more systemic blindness to such unimaginable evils lurking within the community. The very nature of his crimes, rooted in profound psychological disturbances, raises alarming questions about the societal mechanisms in place for detecting and addressing such extreme behavioral aberrations.
All day long, police there removed boxes filled with body parts, a barrel of acid, a refrigerator, and a dresser brimming with photographs and drawings of mutilated dead bodies. The dismembered pieces are said to be mostly of males of various races.
I would say I have never seen something of this magnitude before in relationship to this office or my previous career.
The grisly discovery was made around midnight last night after police were led to Dahmer's apartment by a teenager who said he had been held captive there and threatened with a butcher knife. Even before that, neighbors had been noticing a sickening odor from the filthy unit.
He would tell us that the freezer had went out and his meat had spoiled, and I just went and bought $200 worth of meat and my meat spoiled. I'm sorry about the smell, So we had even loaned him our fan, to blow the air out of his apartment.
The arrest of Jeffrey Dahmer in 1991 marked a harrowing and pivotal moment in criminal history, bringing to an end a series of crimes that were as horrific as they were incomprehensible. This breakthrough, however, did not arise from the meticulous tracking of a serial killer, but from a twist of fate, a narrow escape by one of his intended victims. This escapee's harrowing tale led authorities to Dahmer's door, where they were to uncover the true extent of his gruesome acts. Upon entering Dahmer's Milwaukee apartment, law enforcement officers were confronted with a scene that defied belief. It was a tableau of terror and depravity, photographs capturing the final moments of his victims, remains that bore silent witness to his brutality, and an atmosphere saturated with the palpable residue of evil. The apartment served as a grotesque archive of his crimes, each piece of evidence adding to a narrative of unthinkable horror. Dahmer's subsequent confession, delivered in a tone disturbingly devoid of emotion, was a chilling exposition of his actions. He admitted to the murder of 17 young men, but the scope of his confession went far beyond the act of killing. He spoke of necrophilia and cannibalism, acts so monstrous that they shook the community and the world to their core.
As time went on, yes, I did get there was a sexual part to that. I started saving the skeletons and preserving other parts, and one thing led to another. It took more and more deviant type behaviors to satisfy my urges, and so it just spiraled out of control.
Why the cannibalism?
It made me feel like they were a permanent part of me. Besides the just mere curiosity of what it would be like, it made them feel that they were a part of me, and it gave me a sexual satisfaction to do that.
The stark, unflinching detail of his admissions painted a portrait of a man who was more than just a murderer. He was a predator, who had moved undetected among his victims for years. The revelation of Dahmer's crimes and the manner of his capture raised a multitude of questions about the nature of serial killers. It prompted introspection about the signs that might have been overlooked by those who encountered him and the systemic changes necessary in law enforcement and public safety to prevent future tragedies. The widespread shock and horror that followed highlighted not only the failings in detecting such threats, but also the broader societal implications. The 1992 trial of Jeffrey Dahmer emerged as a profoundly significant media event, encapsulating a mixture of intense public interest, horror, and legal controversy. Dahmer's plea of guilty but insane added a complex layer to the proceedings, igniting fervent debates over the intricacies and interpretations of insanity in the realm of criminal law. This trial peeled back the layers of Dahmer's dark psyche, offering the public and legal experts alike a disturbing insight into the mind of a serial killer. The courtroom became a window into the abyss, revealing the gruesome and unsettling details of Dahmer's string of murders. His confession, coupled with the evidence presented, painted a picture of a man whose actions were as incomprehensible as they were heinous. Dahmer's conviction on 15 counts of murder resulted in 15 consecutive life sentences, a decision that resonated with a public demand for justice and assurance that he would never again walk free. However, the trial's conclusion was not the end of the Dahmer saga.
At the time the crime was committed in count 5 of the information in regard to the death of Edward W. Smith, did the defendant Jeffrey L. Dahmer have a mental disease? Answer, no.
And so it came back for each of the 15 counts. The jury ruling Jeffrey Dahmer was sane at the time he murdered and dismembered 15 young Milwaukee area males. Dahmer appeared emotionless as the verdicts were read. Family members of the victims expressed a feeling of justice served and that they can now begin to put their shattered lives back together.
I feel sorry for his parents. I hope that, they feel the pain that we feel because of what their son did. But now we have to get our lives back together and we have to start living.
After 3 weeks of often gruesome testimony detailing Dahmer's dismemberment of his victims and his fetishes with corpses and body parts, the jury decided that no matter how horrendous his crimes, Jeffrey Dahmer knew right from wrong and had the ability to conform his behavior to the law. That he was, as the prosecutor painted him, a cold-blooded killer who was yet legally sane.
His whole conduct showed that he was a con artist, and he had well planned, and he is above average and intelligent.
Sentencing is expected to be a mere formality. The expectation, 15 life sentences with no possibility of parole.
His murder in prison in 1994 added another chapter to an already dark story, leaving a complex legacy that continues to evoke discussion and analysis.
There are shocking new details about the murder of America's most hated serial killer and how he may have seen his own death coming. Tonight, Diane Diamond reports on the plot to kill a killer.
I am happy and very excited that the monster is finally dead.
It was a brutal murder behind bars, a shocking lapse of prison security. And while correction officials promise an investigation, no one involved with the Jeffrey Dahmer case says that they're surprised.
I use the word hit, and that has been one of the rumors that has been running rampant, was that this was some sort of a hit.
Exactly what happened is still not clear. Dahmer was cleaning a prison bathroom with 2 other inmates when suddenly one of them apparently took a broom handle and started beating Dahmer to death. Prison officials say Dahmer's head may have been bashed against a wall.
There was so much animosity toward him with a number of the inmates were either jealous or resentful over his celebrity status that he had in prison.
Officials say it was this man, Christopher Scarver, who carried out Dahmer's death sentence.
How they caught the assailant is that he was covered with blood. There was apparently a great deal of blood at the scene.
Prison officials won't say why 3 guards assigned to the area left the inmates alone. But for now, they insist the guards did nothing wrong.
I'm confident that staff did everything that they were supposed to be doing in looking out for the safety of the inmates in this situation.
The trial and its aftermath catalyzed crucial conversations and introspection on several fronts. It underscored the urgent need for more effective methods in detecting and preventing such heinous crimes. Questions were raised about the adequacy of mental health treatment, particularly in identifying and managing individuals with severe psychopathic tendencies. Moreover, the trial highlighted the vulnerabilities faced by LGBTQ communities. Many of Dahmer's victims were young gay men, drawing attention to the risks marginalized groups face and the need for greater protection and awareness. The psychological profile of Jeffrey Dahmer has been the focus of intense scrutiny and debate among experts striving to comprehend the motivations behind his appalling crimes. His behavior and actions exhibited classic signs of psychopathy, including a disturbing lack of empathy, utter remorselessness, and marked antisocial tendencies. These traits, coupled with his proclivities for necrophilia and cannibalism, point towards profound and deep-seated psychological disorders. Dahmer's dark fascination with the dead and the cannibalization of his victims suggest a psyche mired in complexities far beyond typical criminal behavior. Psychologists have postulated that these horrific tendencies might have their roots in his childhood, which was characterized by a sense of isolation and neglect. These formative experiences possibly contributed to the development of his abnormal psychology, leading to the monstrous behavior he later exhibited. The Dahmer case has been a significant point of discussion in the ongoing nature versus nurture debate within criminal psychology. This debate delves into the intricate interplay between inherent personality traits and environmental factors in shaping an individual's psyche, particularly in the context of such extreme psychopathology as Dahmer's. His case raises critical questions about the extent to which genetic predisposition and early life experiences contribute to the development of a serial killer. Interviews with Dahmer and his interactions with law enforcement have revealed a complex and deeply disturbed individual. His calm and often emotionless recounting of his crimes during these interactions presented a chilling picture of his mental state. These insights challenge our understanding of the human mind, particularly regarding the capacity for such extreme and inhuman behaviors. The notorious crimes committed by Jeffrey Dahmer and the extensive media attention they garnered had a profound and far-reaching impact on society and culture. His case thrust the issues of mental health and psychopathy into the public spotlight, prompting a re-evaluation of how such behaviors are identified and treated. The gruesome nature of Dahmer's actions, coupled with his psychopathic tendencies, underscored the urgent need for more effective strategies in recognizing and addressing these complex mental health conditions. Furthermore, Dahmer's case exposed significant flaws and inadequacies within the criminal justice system, particularly in its handling of serial killers. It highlighted the challenges and shortcomings in detecting and apprehending individuals who commit such methodically planned and executed crimes. This led to intense scrutiny and calls for reforms in law enforcement approaches, investigative techniques, and the overall handling of serial murder cases. In the realm of media and popular culture, Dahmer's story had a substantial impact on the portrayal of serial killers. It often led to the reinforcement of stereotypes and sensationalism in the depiction of these individuals, influencing public perception and understanding of such criminals. This sensationalist approach, while capturing audience attention, also raised concerns about the responsible reporting and portrayal of violent crimes and their perpetrators. Significantly, Dahmer's targeting of LGBTQ individuals brought to light the vulnerabilities faced by marginalized communities. Many of his victims were young gay men, highlighting the risks and dangers these groups encounter and underscoring the need for greater awareness, protection, and advocacy for these communities. This aspect of Dahmer's crimes prompted discussions about societal attitudes towards LGBTQ individuals and the importance of creating safer and more inclusive environments. The tale of Jeffrey Dahmer, a blend of horror and tragedy, challenges our understanding of morality and the human psyche. As we close this chapter, we reflect on the lessons learned and the need for continual vigilance in recognizing and addressing psychological distress.
It is over now. This has never been a case of trying to get free. I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one.